We're in the Gemara towards the bottom of Samach Vavam with Beis, the last wider lines, where it says, Ashkechan. So till there we were discussing the halacha of Korban Pesach, Korban Tamid, pushing off Shabbos. Now we go to the same concept, but as it relates to Tumah. Ashkechan, Tamid, Upesach, the Dochu Shabbos. So we found the source for Tamid and Korban Pesach pushing off Shabbos. The Dochu Tumah Minolan. What's the source that they're both Deiche Tumah? As it says later, so we're going to learn it later in the Masechta, that they are they push off the Tumah, that's Betzibur. So what's the source for this? So Amri, they said, Keheichi di Yalav Pesach mitamid linya Shabbos, just like we learned out from Gzeir Shava, we had yesterday Mayadoi. So we learned out Pesach from Shabbos regarding pushing off Shabbos. So Hachanami Yalef Tamid mi Pesach linya Tumah. So too we could learn out Pesach Tamid from Pesach regarding Tumah, that just like Pesach is Deiche Tumah, so too the Korban Tamid is Deiche Tumah. Well, Pesach Gufei Minolan. And what's the source that the Korban Pesach, if there's a Tumah Betzibur, then you're allowed to bring the Korban? Amar Rabbi Yechanan, the Makra, because the Pasuk says, Ish ki yeh tamid lenefesh. If an individual is tamid lenefesh, he can't bring the Korban. So what do we see from this? Ish nitche lePesach Sheni. An individual is pushed off to the Korban Pesach Sheni. But ve'ein tzibur nidachen lePesach Sheni. But if it's a tzibur, if most of Yidden are tamei, they're not pushed off to the Pesach Sheni. Ella of the Betumah. They bring the Pesach even while they're tamei. So from here we learn out Pesach, and we compare this also to Korban Tamid. So the Gemara, Malei Rab Shimon ben Lakish, Rab Yechanan, Rish Lakish asked Rab Yechanan on this drasha. So yeah, you're right, there's a drasha that there's a difference between Ish and a Tzibur, but maybe we should say it in the reverse. Ish nitche le Pesach Sheni. That only an individual has an opportunity to bring the Korban by the Pesach Sheni, but Tzibur les luta kanta. A Tzibur that couldn't bring the Pesach Rishon, maybe they don't get a chance to bring the Pesach Sheni either. Maybe that's what you should be medayik from the pasuk. Lo be Pesach Rishon v'lo be Pesach Sheni. So not to say that they could bring the first Pesach, but they can't bring any. Elam Rab Shimon ben Lakish. So therefore Rab Shimon ben Lakish says, I have a different pasuk as a source for this. Meihacha. The source is from the following pasuk. And this is a pasuk that speaks b'chlal about various different people that are tamei, that they have to be sent out of the machna. They have to be sent out of the place where Yidden are. V'yishalchum and amachna, you send out of the machna who? Kol tzarua, v'chol zav, v'chol tamei lenefesh. These three individuals. So between these three individuals, as we'll see in the continuation of the Gemara, it'll explain, tzarua is the most severe, a zav is less, and a tamei lenefesh is the lightest tumah of all of them. If so, says Rab Shimon ben Lakish, so let's look at the pasuk as follows. Yoimar Tmei Mesim. It should just tell me that Tmei Mesim, that's the lightest of all, that he has to be sent out. And Val Yoimar Zavanu Mitzrayim. And it's not necessary to say that the Zav and the Mitzrayim has to leave. Vani Yoimar, and I would say, Im Tmei Mesim Mishtalchim, if a Tmei Meis has to be sent out, Zavanu Mitzrayim like Kol Sheken. A Zav and a Mitzrayim that has a stronger level of Tumah definitely has to be sent out. Now Tosfos points out here, as we'll see in the continuation of the Gemara, that really a Zav, a Metzayre, a Tmei Nefesh, they're not sent out from the same place. A Tmei Meis has to leave from Machne Shchina, which is the place of the Beis HaMikdash itself, the Azara. A Zav has to leave even Machne Levia, which is considered to be the whole Har HaBayis. And a Metzayre has to leave the entire Yerushalayim, or any city, he has to be outside of the city, B'chlal. So l'chayra, they're not even the same. So how could the Gemara ask such a question that the Torah should say one and not the other if they're sent out from different places? So Tosfos remains with a question, but we'll see later in the Gemara that that's only one opinion. According to another opinion, the fact that they're sent out from different places is learned from another pasuk. So that's not what this pasuk is needed for. Here, this pasuk is telling me that they are all sent out. And we're not talking about from where they're sent out, but it's just telling me that they're all sent out. So therefore the Gemara asks the question, if I know that the lightest of all tumas, which is Tmei Meis, is sent out, it's obvious that a Zav and a Metzayre is sent out. Why does it have to tell me all three? So therefore the Shlakish darshans as follows. There is a time shezav and Metzayre and Mishtalchen, that a Zav and a Metzayre are sent out, and ve'ein Tmei Meis and Mishtalchen, and a Tmei Meis is not sent out. And ve'ezezeh Pesach haba betumah. When is this referred to? In a time when you're bringing a Korban Pesach betumah. So only Tmei Meisim, if there's a tzibur that are Tmei Meisim, can bring the Korban Pesach betumah. If you have the tumah of the tzibur is zav or mitzaireh, there's no such a thing that it's mutter to bring a carbon pesach with the tumah of zav and mitzaireh. So that's why the pasuk over here is saying zav and mitzaireh separately to tell me that there's sometimes that a zav and a mitzaireh are sent out even though a tmei meis is not sent out. So you can't learn it out from a tmei meis. So this is the source that a tmei meis by a carbon pesach is not sent out. Amar Abaye, so Abaye asked on Ish Lakish, if this is your source, so then take the exact same drasha that you just said and extend it further. Ihachi, if so, leim and nami, say further as well. Yoimar zav utmei meisim. It would be enough if the Torah would write that a zav and a tmei meis has to leave. Val yoimar mitzaira, and it's not necessary to say mitzaira, which is more severe than a zav and a tmei meis. And I would say zav mishtaleach. If a zav is sent out, mitzaira, which is more severe, definitely has to be sent out. And Elamai, so what am I going to say? I'll extend the drasha that you said before and say the same thing here as well. There's a time that a mitzayra is sent out. And a zav and a tmei meis are both not sent out. And when is this? And that would mean that a carbon pesach could be brought betumah not only for tmei meisim, but even for tumah zav as well. That's what you should learn out from the pasuk. If you're darshaning this way, extend the same thing regarding a zav as well. That the Torah did not have to write a zav, and the Torah did not have to write mitzayra. That is the only reason the Torah writes mitzayra, even though it's more severe and it'd be understood, because tmei meis and zav, there are sometimes that they are not sent out, and by the carbon pesach. Now, maybe that's takadalacha. Maybe we should say that just like the tumah hutra b'tzibur regarding tmei meisim, maybe it applies to tumah zav as well, but it's not true. V'tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Pesach haba b'tumah, the Pesach which is brought even b'tumah when it's tumah hutra b'tzibur, lo yoichlu mimenu zavim v'zavais nidois v'yoldois. It is tumah b'tzibur is only for tmei meis, not a zav, not a zava, not nidais, not yeldes. So we see, but then the Mishnah does say v'im achlu, if they did eat from it, peturin, they'll be potter. The Gemara will later bring a drasha that b'diavad, if they ate from it, they're going to be potter. But what we see over here is that the tumah hotra b'tzibur is only for a tmei meis, not for a zav. But according to the drasha of Rish Lakish, you would be able to learn from the pasuk that even a zav should be able to bring it b'tumah.
Potter from Pesach Sheni or potter from...
No, potter from the einish of kares for eating it betuma. Elam Abaye, so therefore Abaye goes back to the drasha of Rabbi Yochanan. La'olam mikra kama. We go back to the pasuk we brought before, which is Rabbi Yochanan's drasha. And what's that? What was the drasha? Ish kiyeh tamil nefesh. Right? So we learn it out from there. It says ish, that only a ish does not bring the carbon pesach, but a person that's a tzibur, if it's the whole tzibur, then you could bring it. Now, what was the question of Rabbi Yochanan before, of Reish Lakish that is before? That maybe it's teaching me that a tzibur cannot bring b'chlal, not carbon pesach rishon and not carbon pesach sheni. So Abaye says there's another word here in the pasuk that shows me how to darshan this. Lenefesh lomali. Why did the Torah have to write the word lenefesh? That's the question over here. When the Torah writes, again, im kein nichtav rachmane ish ki yeh tomei. It could have just simply said that a person which is tomei does not bring the Pesach Rishon, and he brings the Pesach Sheni. Why does the Torah say lenefesh? It's specifically telling me that this pasuk is only referring to a person that's a tomei lenefesh, which means tmei meis, and not anybody else. So we're excluding a zav and other people that they're not the same as a person that's tmei meis. L'chayre, there's no difference between them. If you're going to darshan the pasuk, the way Rish Lakish darshan the pasuk, which is that a person that's tmei meis cannot bring carbon Pesach Rishon, he could bring carbon Pesach Sheni. If it's the tzibur that's tmei meis, he can't bring not carbon Pesach Rishon and not carbon Pesach Sheni. So that's a halacha that applies to tmei meis, and it'll be the same by a zav. There'll be no difference. So why is the pasuk saying tomei lenefesh? There's nothing unique about this halacha that applies only to tmei meis, and which is different by other kinds of tumah. So why does it say the word nefesh? Lenefesh lameli. Now maybe you're going to argue and say, Hi lenefesh lahachi yudasa. Maybe lenefesh comes to teach me the following. That hatome meis hu the nitchele Pesach Sheni. That only a tome meis is pushed off to the Pesach Sheni. Avol shar tmein loy, but maybe other tmein not. Maybe other tmein could bring even the carbon Pesach Rishon. But that's not true, because Vatanya, we learned in the Braise, Yochel lo yiyu oisim Pesach Sheni, elet mei meisim, v'shahaye b'derech rechoikem, that I would think that who brings the Pesach Sheni? Only the Tmei Meisim, and those that were b'derech rechoikem. So let me go back a second. Let me just correct a second what I said before. In other words, what the Gemara is saying is that, are you going to think to say that only people that are Tmei and Meis can't bring the Pesach Rishon, and they bring the Pesach Sheni, but maybe people that are Zavin and Mitzayroin, other types of Tumas, they can't bring not Pesach Rishon and not Pesach Sheni either? But that's not true, because the Braise here says, I would think that only people that are Tmei Meis could bring the Pesach Sheni. How do I know Zavim, Mitzayroim, Boile Nidois Minayim? From where do I know that the same halacha applies to them as well, that if they can't bring the Pesach Rishon, they bring the Pesach Sheni? Talmud Loimar, Ish, the Torah writes, Ish, before you get to the word lenefesh, the Torah writes ish ki yiyeh tamei. So from here I know that it includes all kinds of tumas as well. So Rashi says, because it says twice ish, or because it says ki yiyeh tamei, it doesn't say ki yiga b'meis, which would refer only to a mace. So I see that this includes all other kinds of tumas. So what's the point? I see over here that the halacha of a person that's tmei meis, that he does not bring the Pesach Rishon, and he does bring the Pesach Sheni, is the same by other kinds of tumas as well, by Zav, by a Nida, by a Metzayra. So why is the Torah writing Dafke Tomei lenefesh? What is that word lenefesh doing there? Lenefesh, the cost of Rahman Elamali. So Ella, what it teaches me is Hachi Ka'amar. So going now back to the drasha of Rabbi Yochanan, if we're going to darshan like Rabbi Yochanan, we'll understand why it says Dafke lenefesh. Ish nitche le Pesach Sheni, ve'ein tzibur nitche le Pesach Sheni. So Rabbi Yochanan darshaned that only an individual is pushed off to the Pesach Sheni, but the tzibur is not. The tzibur, if the tzibur is tamei, you can bring the Pesach Rishon as well. Ela avdi b'tumah, they bring it while they're tamei. And now here's the diak of the nefesh. V'chi avdi tzibur b'tumah, when could you bring the first Pesach b'tumah? If the tzibur is tamei, that's only b'tmei meis, if they're all tmei meis. Aval shar tumas lo yavdi. But regarding any other tumas, if the majority of Yidden are tamei and tumas zav and so on, then they can't bring the Pesach Rishon. So that's why the Torah writes lenefesh, to make this distinction between tmei meis and other tumas, that only by tmei meis do I say tumah hotra b'tzibur, and not b'negeh to the other tumas. So we go back to the drasha of Rabbi Yochanan. So now, since we brought up the Mitzayda over here, the fact that a Mitzayda is sent out of the Machne, so the Gemara brings different details about this halach of the Mitzayda. Amar Rav Chisda, Mitzayda shenichnas lefnim mechitzasei. A Mitzayda that does not keep what he's supposed to stay outside, and he enters inside in the city, pater, he'll be pater, even though he's over on a lav. So Rashi here brings the lav. The pasuk says, Lo yitamu es machneim. They're not allowed to be metame the machna by being present inside. They have to remain outside. So it's a lav, but they'll still be pater from malchus. Why is this? Shenema, because then there's an asay that says, Badad yeshiv mechutz lemachna meishavai. He has to sit alone outside. Hakosev nitkai laese. The Torah then tells you the asay of what he has to do. So this is what's called a lav hanitik laasay. Whenever you have a lav where the Torah tells you the essa that you have to do, if you're over on the lav, there's no malchus for that. So over here it's a lav anitik laseh. So both Rashi and Tosfos point out that this is different than a regular lav anitik laseh. Usually when the Torah writes a lav and then it connects an aseh to it, like for the typical example by Gzela, Hoshef to Shivim, the Torah writes the lav and immediately says the aseh right afterwards. Over here the pasuk of Badad Yeshiv Mechutz Lamachne does not say in the same place Bechlal as the pasuk of Lo Yitamu Es Machneim. It's in a totally different place. But nevertheless, we connect it and we say that this is the aseh that applies to this lav, and therefore we potter from malchus. Eisvei, on this the Gemara asks, it says clearly in a Braisa, not so. Mitzayre shenichnas lefnim mechitzasei, a mitzayre that enters into the mechitza bar boim, he gets malchus. Zav and v'zav shenichnas lefnim mechitzasam, a zav and a zav that enter in the place where they're not supposed to be bar boim, they also get malchus. Utmei meis mutter lekanes lamachne leviyah. Tmei meis is allowed to enter into Machne Leviyah, which in the time of the Beis HaMikdash that refers to the Har HaBayis. And the time when the Yidden were in the Midbar, so the Machne Leviyah. Well, I'm just reading what Rashi says. Rashi here says, look at Rashi, the second wide line, Machne Leviyah, Kol Har HaBayis Chutz L'Chaimas HaZara. That's considered to be Machne Leviyah. There's a Rashi. So that's Tmei Meis. And V'loi Tmei Meis Bulvad, not only is a Tmei Meis allowed to enter into the Har HaBayis, Omru el afila meis atzmai. The body of a dead person could also be in Machne Leviyah. Shenema vayikach Moshe es atzmus Yosef imai. Moshe Rabbeinu took the bones of Yosef. This is this week's parsha. He had the bones of Yosef with him. Imai b'mechitzase. He was together with Moshe, which is in Machne Leviyah. So here I see in this braisa, we're bringing this braisa for the beginning, where it clearly says that a Metzayre that enters is Chayev Malkus. Not like Rav Chisda that said that it's a lav, hanitik laseh, and there's no Malkus. Says the Gemara, you're right, it's a clear braisa. Tanoi, it's a machlekes Tanoim. And the machlekes is whether this pasuk of Bodod Yeshev is taka nitik la'aseh, is the Torah writing it just as an essa, to patu you of the Malkus, or it's needed for something else. The Tanya we learned in the braisa, Bodod Yeshev. This asay of Bodod Yeshev, what is it used for? Levada Yeshev, he has to sit alone, which means Shalayu Tmeim Achedim Yeshvim Imai. Other Tmeim that are also sent out of the Machne are not sent out to the same place where he is. Yachal, I would think, I would think that, so now we know that the Zavin and the Tmei Mesim are not sent out of the city to the place where the Mitzayr is. The Mitzayr has to be totally outside the city, and the Zavin and the Tmei Mesim are not sent there. So where are they sent? I would think that both the Zavin and the Tmei Mesim are sent to the same place. So Talmud Loima, the pasuk says, "V'loy yitamu es machanehem," and do not make the machne tomei. So it says machanehem loshen rabim, which means litin machne lezeh or machne lezeh. There's one machne that the Tmei Meis is sent out of, and there's another machne that the Zav is sent out of. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So this goes back to the point that I said before. According to Rabbi Yehuda, from this pasuk of Bodad Yeshev and V'lo Yitamu es Machneim, I learn out the three different levels. A Mitzayr is sent out of the city Bechlal, a Zav is sent out of even the Harabayis, and a Tmei Meis is sent out of the Azara, but not of the Harabayis. This is where Rabbi Yehuda learned out this distinction from. Shimon says, to teach me that they're all sent out of different places and they're not sent out of the same machne, I don't need this pasuk for. Going back to the pasuk that we had before, v'yishalchum en amachne, kol tzarua, v'chol zav, v'chol tomil lenefesh. So the pasuk says all three here. Yoimat tmei meis. Why wouldn't the Torah just say the lightest one of them, which is tmei meis? Val yoimat tmei zav, and it's not necessary to say a zav, which is more stringent. Vani yoimat tmei meis mishtalchen. If a tmei meis is sent out, zav and lekol sheken, definitely a zav is sent out of the machne. Lama nemar zav. Why does it add and say zav as well? Litin loy machne shnia, because it's adding another machne that he sent out even more, not only of the Azara, but he's even sent out of the Harabayis as well. Then he says, V'yoyim azav al-yoyim ha-mitzayre. If it says that a zav is sent out, it's not necessary to say that a mitzayre is sent out, because a mitzayre is more stringent. V'anayoyim azav mishtalcha mitzayroyin l'kol sheken. If a zav is sent out, I know for sure that a mitzayre is sent out. Lama nama mitzayre, why does it say mitzayre? Litin le-machne shlishis. A mitzayre is sent out of a third machne. He's sent out of the city in general. So therefore, according to Rab Shimon, the different levels of machnes that they're sent out of is learned out of this pasuk. So Kishuayim Bodad Yeshev, when the Torah writes Bodad Yeshev, what is the Torah teaching me here? It's not teaching me just the fact that he sits alone with no other Tmeim with him, because that I already know from the other pasuk. So why does the Torah writing Bodad Yeshev? HaKosev Nitkoy La'aseh. This is an extra pasuk to teach me that the lav of a Loyatamu es Machneim, you don't get Malkus for it because it's connected to this asay of Bodad Yeshev. So here in this Brais I see a machlekes between Rab Shimon and Rab Yehuda, whether the pasuk of Bodad Yeshev is written to make it a lav nitik la'aseh, and you potter from Malkus, like Rav Chisda said, or no, it's needed to teach me the different levels of the machnes that the Zav, the Tamei Meis, and the Mitzayra are sent out of. Now the Gemara takes a look at this Braisa itself. So the Braisa pointed out here, and we had it before also in the beginning of the Gemara today, that the lightest of all tumas is Tamei Meis, a Zav is more stringent, and a Mitzayra is the most stringent. So the Gemara here will explain why is this. Where do we see the stringency of a Zav over a Tamei Meis and so on? My chumre de zav mit tmei meis. What's the stringency of a zav more than a tmei meis? Shekain tume yaitza olav megufay. So you'll tell me that the stringency is that by tmei meis the source of his tume is from an emission that comes from his own body. It's not from touching something else. So therefore it's a stronger tume. Frekte Gemara but adarabba. On the contrary, I'll show you another reason why tmei meis is stronger. Tmei meis chomer shekain ton azah shlishi shvi. That's a kind of tume that you have to sprinkle the waters of the paraduma the third and seventh day. So that's more stringent. On Makram, so the Gemara answers and explains when we say here that Tmei Meis is the lightest tumah, we're not really referring to Tmei Meis. We're referring to something else that comes along with Tmei Meis in the pasuk. Tomei. The Torah could have just simply said that the Tomei, send out the Tomei, but it says V'chol Tomei, send out all the people that are Tomei from the Azara. L'Rabbe is Tmei Sheretz. So that includes not only the Tmei Meis, it's also a person that touches a Sheretz that becomes Tomei. And V'zav, Chomer mit Tmei Sheretz. What we really mean to say is not that a Zav is more Chomer than a Tmei Meis, but a Zav is more stringent than a Tmei Sheretz. My chumre, so now what's that chumre? Where do we see that a zav is more chumre than a sheretz? Kidam maran, like we said before, that the tumah of a zav comes from his body itself, and a sheretz is from touching something else. Adarabe, on the contrary, I'll show you that a tumah of sheretz is more stringent. Sheretz chomer, there's a stringency to the tumah of a sheretz. Shekain metame ba'inus. You become tameh if you touch a sheretz, even if it was forcefully against your will. It makes no difference. However you touch the sheretz, you become tameh, which is not the case by a zav. A zav, if, as Rashi here brings, if a zav has the emission of a zav that happened through overeating or over drinking or some physical activity that causes this to happen, a zav is a chayli, it's a sickness, and it happens through some kind of activity that's called ba'inus, and it's against the person's will, so then you're not going to become Tomei Zav. A Tomei Zav is only if it happened without all these things that forcibly cause it. So if so, we see that the Tumah of Sheretz is stronger, has a stringency. So Amri, the Gemara says, the answer to this question, Ki hai gavne zav nami tmuyim etame ba'inus. The kind of zav that we're talking about over here is a zav that will become tamei, even if it happens ba'inus, even if it happens through overeating and so on, it happens ba'inus. So as Rashi points out, there are different kinds of zavs. There's a zav that has one ri'iyah, one emission, which makes him tamei just until that night. Well, then when you have an emission twice, a second ri'iyah, so then you become tamei for 7 days, and then there's a zav that has 3 ri'iyahs. All the halachas that it says about a zav. The point is over here, we're talking about a zav that had 1 ri'iyah. And he's tamei only until that night, and goes to the mikveh, like a sheretz. So the zav that's similar to a sheretz has the same chumrah of a sheretz that he becomes tamei even ba'inus. K'der Rav Huna, like Rav Huna said, the Omar Rav Huna, Re'iyah Rishayna Shel Zav Metame Ba'inus. When it comes to the first Re'iyah of a Zav, he becomes tamei even if it's ba'inus, just like the sheretz itself. So therefore we see that a Tumas Zav is more stringent than the Sheretz. It becomes tamei like a Sheretz, even ba'inus, and it's a Tumah that comes from his body and not from touching something outside. That's the Chumrah of Tumas Zav over Tumas Sheretz. Now the Gemara goes to the next thing. My Chumrei de Mitzayra. So we said that Mitzayra is more Chomer mizav, from a Zav. What is the Chumrah that a Mitzayra has more than a Zav? Shekein, Ton, Priye, Frime, Mitzayra, when he's tamei, so he has to let his hair grow. Prima, he has to have torn clothing, also betashma shamite, not allowed to have any relations with his wife. So we see that this is a level of Tumah that has many more halachas that don't apply to a Zav. Says the Gemara Adarabba, on the contrary, I'll show you a chumrah that Zav has, that Mitzayra does not have. Shekain, Metameh, Mishkav, U'Maishav, whatever he lies on, whatever he sits on, he makes it Tamei. U'Metameh Klicheres Beheset. And another stringency that you find only by a Zav, that he causes Tumah even Beheset, which means even if he doesn't touch something, but he moves it, and even if he moves it indirectly. For example, a Zav has a stick, and you're moving a keli with this stick, so if the Zav caused to move it, it becomes tamei. So these are unique stringencies that you find only by a Zav and not by only by a Mitzayra, that is. Only by a Zav and not by a Mitzayra. So how could you say that a Mitzayra is more Chomer? So again, the Gemara says similar to what it said before, we're not talking about the Chumrah of Mitzayra more than Zav, but something else that comes along with Zav. On Makra, the pasuk, when it says, it could have said Zav, but it doesn't just say Zav. It says V'chol Zav. L'rab is Balkeri. We're not only talking about a Zav, we're talking about a Balkeri, which is also a Tumah that comes from an emission from the body, but different. Rashi here points out that it's a different emission. It's not the same thing. There's a Zav and there's a Balkeri. The Gemara in Nida talks about it, that it's not exactly the same thing, but it's a similar thing to a Zav. So when the Torah says V'chol Zav, it's referring to a Balkeri. And that's what the Mitzayra is more Chomer of. Mitzayra Chomer mi Balkeri. The Mitzayra is more, the Tumah of a Mitzayra is more stringent than a Balkeri. Because by a Balkeri, those Chumras we said before that a Zav have doesn't apply. There's no Mishkav U'Maishav and the Hesed. So that's what a Mitzayra is more Chomer of. Umay Chumrei. And what's the Chumrei? Kedam Maran. like we pointed out before, that a Metzaira has Priya, Prima, all the different things that a Metzaira has that you don't find by a Balkari. But Adarabe, on the contrary, I'll show you a certain Chomre that a Balkari has that a Metzaira does not have. Balkari Chomer, a Balkari is more Chomer, Shekei Metame B'mashahu. If there's an emission that's even a tiny drop, he becomes Tomei. Rashi says even if it's a tiny drop like a mustard seed, that makes the person Tomei. So this is a very big chumrah that you have by a Balkari and not by a Metzaira. How large does a nega have to be for a person to become a Metzaira? Has to be the size of a gris, which is larger than a mashu. So therefore I see that by Metzaira, it's not as stringent as a Balkari where the tumah happens only through a mashu. And says the Gemara, this Braisa holds like a different opinion that says that a Balkari does not become tummy with a mashu. Savalak Rab Nasan, he holds like what Rab Nasan said, the Tanya Rab Nasan Noimim Mishum Rabbi Shmuel, Zav Tzarich Chsimas Pi Ha'ama. In order for a Zav to become tummy, and the same also with a Balkari, it has to have an emission at least as much as Chsimas Pi Ha'ama that it can close up the opening of the Amma, of the Avid of the person. So that's larger than the size of a Gris. It's not just a Mashahu, and therefore there's no extra chumrah that a Metzaira has over the, there's no extra chumrah that the Balkari, that is, has over the Metzaira. But the Chachamim did not agree to this opinion of Abnasan. And the Iskashle, Balkari Lizav, and a Balkari, as far as this is concerned, is similar to a Zav, that even by a Zav, the same halacha is like a Balkari, that the emission has to be at least Chasimas Pia Amma, and therefore it comes out that a Metzaira is going to be more Chamor than a Balkari, at least, even if not from a Zav, but more Chamor from a Balkari. Now the Gemara concludes and says, so in the Pasik, we darshaned over here when it says that v'yishalchum menamachne kol tzarua v'chol zav v'chol tamei lenefesh. So when it said kol tamei, we said it adds even a tamei sheretz. When it says kol zav, we said that it adds even a tumah of a balkeri. When the Torah writes kol tzarua, what does that come to add? V'chol tzarua lomali. Why does the Torah writing kol tzarua? Says the Gemara, you're right, there's really no drasha to darshan from this, but Aidi, the Chsiv, Kol Zav, when the Torah wrote Kol Zav and it wrote Kol Tamil Nefesh, so Ksiv Nami Kol Tzarua. The Torah also wrote a similar expression of Kol Tzarua, even though there is nothing else to be added from Tzarua. Zok the Gemara, now we go back to the Braisa itself, where there was a machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon. From where do we learn out the differences in the levels of the machne that these three individuals are sent out? The Tmei Meis, the Zav, and the Metzaira. Sagt the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda, Shapir ka'omer Rab Shimon. Now, why wouldn't Rabbi Yehuda agree to what Rab Shimon says? Rab Shimon brings the drasha from this pasuk, V'yishalchum en amachne kol tzarua v'chol zav v'chol tamei lenefesh. Isn't that a perfect source to show you the difference of the three different places that they're sent out of? Why did Rabbi Yehuda not want to learn it out from there? And instead, Rabbi Yehuda had to learn it out from Bodad Yeshiv Mechutz Lamachne and V'lo Yitamas Machneim. Why doesn't he agree to Rab Shimon? Says the Gemara, Hahu mi boyale l'kedetanya. He learns out from this pasuk, from the Braisa, that it says something else. Rabbi Eliezer said, Yochel, I would think, Dochku Zaven and Mitzirayin, if Zaven and Mitzirayin that are not supposed to bring a carbon Pesach, but they were determined and they wanted to bring the carbon v'nichnesu la'azara. They pushed their way into the azara b'pesach haba b'tumah. It's a carbon pesach that was being brought b'tumah with other people that were tmei meis, but only tmei meis is supposed to come and bring, and they are not supposed to be there. But they pushed their way in as well. Yachol yil chayavin. So I would think they should be chayav kodesh for being there and coming for the carbon pesach, even though it's not hutra for them. Talmud Loimar v'yishalchu min amachne kol tzirua v'chol zav v'chol tamei lenefesh. In this pasuk, it equates them, it puts them all together, that you send them all out of the machne. So since it puts them together, I learn out b'shah shetmei meisim mishtalchen. When the tmei meisim are sent out, zav and mitzayron mishtalchen. The zav and the mitzayr has to be sent out as well. Ain't tmei meisim mishtalchen. When the tmei meis is not sent out, which is when you can bring the carbon pesach. So ein zav and mitzayre mishtalchen, the zav and the mitzayre is not sent out either, and therefore I learn out from here that bidi eved, if they came and they joined together with everyone else, they don't get kadas. But I cannot learn out from here that even lechatchila they bring it, because there's the other drasha that we said lenefesh. We learn out, or there's the other drashas that we learn out that says that a tamei zav and a mitzayre cannot bring. But at least we learn out from here that bidi eved, if they joined, they're not chayiv kadas. This is the source for this. So that's what he learned out from this pasuk. One more piece here. The Gemara says, Omamar, we said before, Zov v'chol Zov. When the Torah writes, it could have written Zov, but instead it writes v'chol Zov. L'rab is Balkeri. It comes to add a Balkeri as well. V'sayele l'Rab Yechanan. This is a proof to what Rabbi Yechanan said. Rabbi Yechanan said the following statement, and he said two different things that are really not related to each other, but as Rashi said, he heard them together, so he said them, he repeated it. One thing he said was, Mechilois loiniskachu, the tunnels that there were under the Harabayis, or under the Azara, do not have the Kedusha of the Azara itself. Taisus actually points out it depends. The ones that are open to the Kedusha of the Azara, their opening is into, so they do have the Kedusha of the Azara, but the ones that are open only to the outside don't have the Kedusha of the Azara. And then the other thing he said is, Ubalkeri mishtaleach chutz l'shtei machnes. A Balkeri is compared to a Zav, just like a Zav is not allowed to go into the Azara or the Harabayis. The same thing also, a Balkeri is sent out of these two machnes. That's what you learn out from V'chol Zav. So this is the halacha that Rabbi Yechanan said. Meisvei, but I'll ask you a question on this. It says in a Braise, Balkeri kemaga sheretz. A Balkeri is compared to a person that's tummy from touching a sheretz. That's what the Braise says. So my love, Lagabi, what is it compared? Don't you think it's compared for this, Lemachnoisam, to tell you from where a Balkeri is sent out, where a Balkeri is not allowed to go. And what is that? A person that's Tomei Sheretz is like a Tmei Meis. He's only not allowed to go into the Azara, but he's allowed to go on the Harabayis. So aren't we saying here that a Balkeri is compared to a Tmei Sheretz and not to a Zov? He's allowed to go on the Harabayis. Says the Gemara, Loi. We're not comparing a Balkeri to a Sheretz, to a Magesh Sheretz regarding the Harabayis. L'tum Oisam. We're comparing it for the Tumah, for the level of the Tumah itself, that he's Tomei until at night. Zakta Gemara l'tumaisam. You're comparing it for the fact that he's tummy until at night. Hai tumas erev ksiv bei, v'hai tumas erev ksiv bei. By a Balkeri, the Torah clearly writes that he's tummy until at night, just like it writes it by a tumas sheretz. So it's clear. It's not necessary to compare it to a tumas sheretz. It says it by the tumas Balkeri himself. Elo lav lemachnoisam. Again, doesn't it mean that in this Braise it's saying we compare a Balkeri to a person that's tummy from touching a sheretz, that he gets sent out only from the Azara, not from the Harabayis like a Tumazov? So this is a question on Rabbi Yechanan. Says the Gemara, no, loy lo'olam letumaisam. This Braise is comparing it regarding the Tumah. And what the comparison is coming to teach me is the Balkeri kemaga sheretz, that it's similar to a person that's tummy from touching a sheretz. Ma maga sheretz metame ba'oinis. Just like when you touch a sheretz, you become tummy even if you touched it ba'oinis. Af Balkeri metame ba'oinis. So to a Balkeri, even though it's similar to a Zav, but it's not similar to a Zav in this sense, that a Zav is not tummy if it happened ba'oinis, but a Balkeri becomes tummy even if it happened ba'oinis.